Welcome to Light Church Online. Thank you for joining us for today's message.
I told you today we would talk about that four-letter word that don't nobody like. And so we might as well get right to it. Turn over to Ecclesiastes. Now I realize that's not a book that y'all just sit down and read through, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to find it, actually a few seconds. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And there's actually one verse that I want to read from the New Living Translation. Now the King James says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the matter." But the New Living says, "Now here is my final conclusion." Now, of course, the book of Ecclesiastes is what we might call a poetic book. And so in it, you will find several antidotes. You will find several prescriptions. You will find wisdom that will help in certain areas of your life. When we come to the end of that book, the writer says, here's the conclusion of the matter. In other words, you can sum it all up with this. You there? All right, read verse 13. All right, the whole matter. This is it. Go on. Say that one more time. All right. For this is what? All right. Now, here's the New Living Translation. Fear God, obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. So now, if you don't know the Bible from Genesis to Revelations, here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and obey his commands. That sums it up. Your life runs on that track. Fear God. Well, when you say fear, Pastor, are you talking about be afraid? Yes. It's not a terror. You know, we can dress it up and say we mean respect for God. Yeah, that's part of it, but there's also a certain amount of fear. That's not bad, because when you're dealing with power, you have to have a certain amount of fear in order to respect power. You don't just handle it any kind of way, because to do so would be to your detriment. There are certain rules that God has established for how life is supposed to be lived. And when you do not respect those rules, when you, as they say, throw caution to the wind, and you decide that you are not going to obey God's rules, then your life jumps the track. Now, again, the word obey is considered a negative word when it actually isn't. It is an empowering word. To obey doesn't make you less, it makes you more. Plus, it gives you protection. We look at words like obedience and submission as though they are negative. And so, because we hear them that way, we tend to either disregard, ignore, or just plain disobey. And it comes, I dare say, naturally. What do you mean, Pastor? Well, you see, when we are born into a natural realm, and that natural realm no longer flows Godward. Doesn't flow Godward. All right? It flows in the direction that its God flows in. And Jesus called Satan the god of this world. And so you don't really have to teach a child to disobey. Do you? Now you got to teach them to obey. Whereas before the fall of man, that never was an issue. And so since we have suffered under the fallen nature of man, whenever we hear somebody say, don't, y'all smiling like you know exactly what comes next, right? There is this, first of all, why not? And the more we keep wrestling with it, we get to, well, they didn't really mean. But when you go back to the book of Genesis, isn't that where it all got started? God said, eat anything in the garden you want. Just don't eat this one. Now, the question about those instructions did not originate from man. Did they? Where did they originate from? Yeah, we go back to the book. Satan said, did God tell y'all not to eat of any of this stuff? Notice the deception. Because that's not what God said. Right? And so the woman begins to tell him, well, what he really said was, we can eat everything, but we're not supposed to eat or touch this one. Number one, he didn't say don't touch it. I don't know why you would touch it, but that's not what he said. So now begins the discussion and the question, why would God tell us not to eat that? So then comes the suggestion by the adversary. In other words, the door now is open. Because, if we eat that, you're going to be as wise as he is. Well, number one, weren't you already? He gave you dominion and authority over the whole earth, right? He was teaching you and training you how to rule. Teaching you how to speak like he spoke. How to command like he commanded. So now the devil's got you questioning God's motives. And the moment man bought into that, what happened? Let me put it this way. Was it a step up or a step down? So, obedience was never intended to take from us or to move us back. Obedience was given so that we would continue to move forward. But since the nature of man is fallen and now is subject to an outlaw spirit called the devil, obedience is looked upon as being negative. And it originates not from man or from God, but from our adversary himself. So the result is, every time we hear now the word obey, we think it's something bad. And then we put up walls and we try and rationalize our rebellion. And the result is never what God intends. You cannot walk in rebellion and expect to enjoy the blessings of God. I mean, in any area. So when we look at that 4-letter word, obey, I never will forget the first time I was actually challenged from the scriptures about that word. I was doing a wedding ceremony, and I came to the part where the instructions from the word are, they didn't change just because it's 2017. Wives, man, listen, not quiet. You see that? It just got real quiet in here. Wives, oh, why y'all whisper that word? See what I'm talking about? See what I'm talking about? Obey. Now, that's either in there or it's not. Y'all help me. Is it in there? All right. Now, see, the devil right now is telling you, but that's not what he really meant. Just like he did with Eve in the garden. No, he meant what he said. So I'm doing this ceremony, and I get to the point where I say, the Bible says, wives, submit to your own husbands, obey them. And so that was in the ceremony at that time. We go through the whole ceremony. I'm at the, I don't usually go to the receptions, but the reception just happened to be at the church. So I'm making my appearance at the reception. I don't usually eat wedding cakes, or I didn't then because they tasted like wedding cakes. But this time, I'm trying to be sociable. I'm putting a piece of cake in my mouth. And here comes Mr. Biblically ignorant, but yet he knows everything. And he says, preacher, I got a bone to pick with you. And so, you know me. Yeah, well, what is, man? He said, you skipped the part where it tells her to obey. Man, what you talking about? Said the scriptures say wives supposed to obey their husband, doesn't it? I said, yeah. He said, but you didn't put that in the ceremony. I said, well, in the first place, I think it was in there, but let's just say I skipped it. I said, if I was going to tell her to obey, I would also have to tell him he's supposed to submit to her. Oh, now you wives going to say amen now. Did y'all hear that? When I said obey, now when I say he got to submit, that's right, Pastor, that's right. Y'all checking me out to see how far I was going with it. Okay, boy, I'm telling you, boy, y'all some hard people. But I love you, though. So I said, I would also have to tell him he had to submit. Well, what are you talking about? So I had to take him to the scriptures. Book of Ephesians says, submitting one to another. Now, you didn't read that? Well, by now, I'm ticked off. Y'all know preachers get ticked off from time to time. I'm ticked off. He done interrupted my cake. Now I can't enjoy my ginger ale and sherbets. Back then, boy, that was the punch. Shoot, they call it frappe now, but that's what it was. It was ginger ale and sherbet. And he done interrupted all that with this foolishness about wanting to make sure that women know they're supposed to obey their husbands. So I had to show him in the scriptures where it says submission's supposed to go both ways. Now, men have used it as a whipping board, but that's because, like I said, we didn't understand the purpose for obedience. And we've always, even when trying to do it right, we still had that negative connotation of that concept, of that principle. Obedience is not supposed to be something that strips you. It's supposed to be something that empowers you. And when you get right down to it, what is walking by faith? Simply put, it's obeying what God said. You want to know the summary of what it means to live by faith? Just do what he says, and you will be living by faith. And here in the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, this is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God. Well, we know we live in a society now that the fear of God is becoming diminished almost with every passing day. And so men act recklessly because there's no fear of God. And men have decided that they can make up their own rules because there's no fear of God. We can live life the way we want to live it on our terms because there's no fear of God. And so your recklessness affects me. There you go, getting quiet again. My recklessness affects you. So it don't matter. I can sleep with whoever I want to sleep with because I don't have any fear of God. But that's going to affect you. Our kids are all messed up sexually because adults have allowed the fear of God to diminish. So now we wonder what's wrong with these kids. The seeds of the irreverence of God are now being seen in every corner of human existence. Because when you throw out the fear of God and throw caution to the wind, your life jumps the track. And you will not like where it ends up. But he says that's not all, just the fear of God. He says obey his instructions. When you obey the instructions of the Lord, according to God, you will live blessed in the land that he gives you. That was the summary of what he told Israel. Do what I say, and the land that I have given you will treat you well. Even though you may have adversaries, if you do what I tell you, if you obey me, there'll be nobody that can stand before you. My goodness. So obedience was never intended to take away from us. It was intended to empower us against adversaries. And when you decide that you are going to live rebelliously and disregard instructions that are given you, you take yourself off the track that God says he intends for you to run on so that your life would be blessed. Now, let me conclude by just showing you a few areas where obedience blesses. We never would consider this. But thanks be to God for the Holy Ghost. You ready? Turn over to 1 Samuel. Samuel, of course, being a prophet of God, is the instrument that God uses to put in place Israel's request from God for a king. So Saul is chosen, much to the chagrin of God, who said to them, you really don't know what you're asking for. The system that I have got you operating under is a much better system than the rest of the nations have. But they were insistent. We don't want to live that way anymore. And they made that determination because the prophet's sons were wicked. The prophet's sons did not obey God. They took advantage of the people. And so the result was, remember when I just said to you, when you throw caution to the wind and you live recklessly, it affects me? Well, them, that is the sons of the prophet, them living recklessly affected the people. So the people said, we don't want to live under that system anymore. So give us a king like all the other nations had. Well, God sent Samuel to anoint them a king. So they came up with Saul. Well, Saul was given instructions by the Lord. Make a long story short, he didn't follow those instructions. God sent him to a place where he instructed him to kill everything. Kill the livestock. Don't mix and mingle with the people. Why? Because God was trying to keep them from having fun? No, he was trying to empower them. And he told them, you get in there mixing and mingling with those people, it's going to affect you and it's going to affect your relationship with me. They didn't listen. Saul started listening to the people instead of listening to God. So when he went in there, instead of him killing all the livestock, he calls himself being slick. He gonna save the best stuff. Because certainly God didn't mean the best livestock. You know, I mean, God is smart. And he couldn't have meant, God knows that we got to have shoes and clothes. So he just meant the stuff we was going to give to Goodwill. He surely couldn't have meant give away the Neiman Marcus stuff. So Saul brings back the best of the livestock, and Samuel comes down there to check on whether or not he has followed God's instructions. All of a sudden, they hear all of these sheep. You know what sheep do? Somebody give me a sheep sound. Just keep going, keep going. Saul said, hey, what's up, Sam? He said, man, didn't God tell you to kill up all the livestock? Y'all keep going. Didn't God tell you to kill up all the livestock? Saul said, I killed up all the livestock. Samuel said, so what's all them sheep noises I hear? And it's in that context that we have the saying, be sure your sin will find you out. So I said, I killed up all the life. He said, well, and so he said, well, surely God didn't mean for us to put down the best stuff. In fact, we were going to bring that as an offering. So now you're going to bribe God. Yeah. You know how it goes. Well, surely God didn't mean for me to be put outdoors. So I took the tithes and paid my rent. But I was going to give him my offering soon as my bonus come. Soon as my income tax check come. All right. And so, long story made short, 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22. Samuel replied, "What is more pleasing to the Lord, your burnt offerings and sacrifices, or your obedience to his voice?" Listen, obedience is better than sacrifice. And submission, there's another word that we have looked at negatively, because we think to submit puts us in some kind of insubordinate place. But again, submission is not meant to take away from you. It is meant to empower you. Submission is better than offering the fat of rams. Verse 23, rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshiping idols. What is more pleasing to God? God values obedience much more than ritual. That's what we're supposed to learn. Okay, so you came to church and you was all up, oh, nobody like you, Lord. Nobody, nobody like you, Lord. Yeah, so you're supposed to be impressing God with that. But when it comes time for you to do what he says, nobody like you, Lord. Oh, come on. Now, if your dad said to you, "I want you to take my car, go get some gas, get it washed, go run a few errands, and then bring my car back," would you interpret those instructions as him trying to keep you from having fun? No. Because he gives him his car. So if you obey his instructions, you get to drive the car, right? But let's say you decide, I'm going to make the block, go by my girl's house so she can see I got it going on. I'm going to put the seat all the way back. I don't know how y'all drive like that, but it wasn't no better in our day, okay, because, you know, y'all did this. It was the difference between the generation is the way you lean. Okay, some of them leaned out the window like that. Some of them leaned over like, you know. So anyway, so you go up. Well, when you come back to the house about 1 o'clock in the morning, has your disobedience added to your life or taken away from you? You follow what I'm saying? Obedience is not supposed to take from us. Now, if you followed his instructions, brought the man's car back, keys, car washed, all that, and he sends you on another area, you did the same thing. What do you suppose would happen when you say, "Dad, I got this date tonight. I'd like to go pick my girl up. Can I use the car?" What do you think might happen? He probably would say yes. So your obedience has not taken anything from you. It has added to you. Are you listening to me? He gives you the car. You go pick your girl up. And he said, "Now, son, the speed limit is 65 miles an hour on the highway, 35 miles an hour on the streets." You got your girl in there, and this your boy? Your boy pulls up in a car he ain't got no business in. And I'm just using you as an example. And so he pulls up on the side of you. Your girl is in there cheesing, you know. And there you are cruising down the highway, 65 miles an hour. Your boy pulls up, and he, And so he speeds up, you speed up. He speeds up, you speeds up. Before you know it, y'all going 100 miles an hour. All of a sudden, another car pulls up. This one ain't got no young lady in it. It's got a man with a uniform in it. And he got some decorations on his car. All right. Now, your disobedience, is that going to empower you? Or is it going to take from you? Do you understand? It's really just that simple. This is the conclusion of the matter. Do what God says do, and you will be empowered. Now, every part of God's creation understands that, but man. Let's look at it. Mark chapter 1, verse 27. With authority, he commands even the unclean spirits, and they, what? They obey him. Well, when the unclean spirits obey Jesus, who's the beneficiary of it? The people that those unclean spirits have been operating in. You got it? Look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 27. Even the winds and the sea, what? Obey him. Question, who was the beneficiary of the winds and the sea obeying Jesus? The disciples, because they said we're going to die, remember? Luke 17. Listen to what Jesus says. If you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you would say to this sycamore tree, be thou rooted up and be thou planted in the sea, and it would, come on, obey you. Now, who would be the beneficiary of a tree that you spoke to getting up and moving? Huh? Obviously, you, the one who spoke. I assume you would not speak to trees to move them if there were no advantage to you. Right? All I'm trying to help you see is obedience on whatever level you find it was never intended to take away from us. It was always intended to bless us. And whenever you decide that you are not going to follow his instructions, you're going to find something missing in your life. That, brothers and sisters, that's the conclusion of the matter. Do you fear God? Well, if you fear God, you won't live recklessly. Because when God says, if you eat this tree, y'all don't know that scripture? If you eat this tree, you will surely die. But if you don't fear God, what you going to do? Oh, I'm going to eat this tree. And what's going to happen? You're going to die. In other words, you disregard his instructions. So whether it's your physical life, your relationships, your money, if you don't submit to God's instructions, death is the result. On the other hand, when you do submit and you obey him, what did God tell you to do with your money? You obey him, and guess what? You get taken from you or get added to. What did he tell you to do with your body? If you do what he told you to do with your body, does your health increase or decrease? What did he tell you to do relative to your children? If you obey him, do your kids get better or do they get worse? It's just that simple. You fear God and obey his commands. Stand with me.
Life is a race, but you don't have to run it alone. Take advantage of your help. Receive Jesus today, and he will help you with everything you're going through. God has a plan for you. The first step in that plan is salvation. Read Romans 10:9 and pray this prayer of salvation. God in heaven, I believe in my heart you raised Jesus from the dead. I confess with my mouth, Jesus is the Lord. Jesus, I call on you now for my eternal salvation. I receive forgiveness for all my sin. I accept your unconditional love. Thank you for receiving me. I submit myself to you. With you as my helper, I will live according to your plan the rest of my life. Amen. If you were blessed by today's message, we encourage you to give an offering. Simply click the Give Online link on the Light Church homepage. Thank you for tuning in this week. We look forward to you joining us during our next broadcast. Have a blessed week.